we are joined by Howie Kurtz. He is the host of MediaBuzz over on Fox News. Howie, appreciate you making the time for us. You've had Clay on and me on many times in the past. Great program you do there over at Fox. You're focused on all the news, but obviously the media angle in particular. Let's start with this one. Have you been surprised at how the Democrat-aligned, or I should say more Democrat-favoring, however you want to put it, the CNN, MSNBC industrial complex going after Trump on the crime thing, even though some of their own Democrat talking heads are saying this is not a winning issue for us guys?
I'm stunned because there is this sort of knee-jerk reaction among media liberals that if it's Trump, it's a police state, he's an authoritarian. And yet, you know, numbers aside, we can argue about the numbers. I mean, people here are scared. There's been a wave of carjackings. There was 16 carjackings in July alone. And that's scary stuff. I know people that it's happened to. And so you would think there'd be a welcoming of some extra firepower, FBI, National Guard, and all of that. And instead, a lot of folks on the left are using it as an opportunity to beat up on the president.
Are you, I mean, even by crazy anti-Trump reflexive ideology, I was surprised when Trump said, hey, we're going to surge resources in Washington, D.C. I think it's hard to argue the president doesn't have the constitutional authority to do this based on where D.C. is. So it's not L.A., so you don't really have a separation of powers argument in some way. I was stunned by how aggressively Democrats have come out and said, well, crime's not really that bad. And to the credit of, we played this clip earlier, even like Joe Scarborough on MSNBC, quite a few left-leaning media have been willing to say, yeah, this is actually not a argument to make. Crime is awful. Are you surprised that typical Democrats, the Chuck Schumers of the world, have really tried to fight Trump on this?
I am. Well, if you're Chuck Schumer, you've got 20 security agents surrounding you, so
right.
He doesn't have to worry. But yeah, I think Scarborough kind of nails it. Like he says, I talk to my Democratic friends, and, they're worried. And, we can get into a debate about the numbers, and Trump says it's never been this bad, and actually it's down from what it was last year. But who cares about the numbers? The District of Columbia, where I am now, is the fifth most dangerous in terms of violent crime in the country. That's an embarrassment. It's a disgrace. And I get the home rule argument, but D.C.'s always had limited home rule powers. And if this can help at all, and now Trump wants to extend it beyond 30 days, why it makes the Democrats appear like they don't really care about crime. They only care about the politics of it. And I just think it's disgraceful.
What do you make of these allegations that Senator Adam Schiff approved leaking classified information to harm President Trump, Howie? I know you've been following this story.
Yeah, it's a little hard for me to judge because this is a whistleblower whose name we don't know and who first made these allegations several years ago. I do think there's a little bit of a risk for the president in that at the present moment, he seems to be going after or having the Justice Department go after a whole lot of his political enemies, and he's not a fan of Schiff, as he calls him. But I think we have to take it seriously, and I think there does seem to be an effort to go after Letitia James and all of these people who have basically tried to screw Trump over the years. I think if you do too much of that, and, it's not like the Justice Department just says, oh, hey, let's go after Schiff. Trump is pushing him. And the thing about Trump is, he's totally transparent about it. He says the quiet part out loud. He says Barack Obama is guilty of treason. And you can agree, you can disagree. But again, coming back to the point that even if people don't like this president, don't agree with his policies, you got to give him credit for being aggressive on crime, on Putin, and a whole bunch of other things.
We're talking to Howard Kurtz. You're in D.C. Buck and I both have lived in D.C. I went to college there. Buck worked there. The Washington Post used to dominate the city of Washington in a way that very few newspapers have ever dominated any city's overall media scene. How would you assess the Post's influence now? How do you analyze what Jeff Bezos is trying to do? How does the newspaper impact daily life in D.C. now compared to how it might have in past generations?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, as an alumnus of the paper back when it was not quite so blatantly left-leaning, almost all the stars have left, and they're blaming Bezos. Now, I understand, they don't like the idea that Bezos wants certain editorial stances on the editorial page. That is his prerogative as the owner. But as I've watched one after another people leave, it is just not the paper it was. Plus, newspapers are not as influential overall as they were. The Post still comes up with some good scoops, but it is kind of sad. I mean, I think, radio shows and podcasts are now the new media that drive a lot of coverage. But you can't drive all your best investigative reporters, your best people who cover these beats. You can't drive them all away and still claim to have an influential newspaper. It's a sad situation, and obviously the Washington Post is not the only place that faces this.
Can they rebuild? I mean, you look at a place like CNN, Howie, which I was a conservative contributor there a decade ago. And as I say to people, there were others. Kayleigh McEnany, when I was there, was another. She's an alumna of CNN. But they would actually have conservatives on. I know they've started to have Scott Jennings because they've realized they can't, and a few others, they can't just do this total echo chamber situation that they've had under Biden and Trump before that. But is it possible to fix these brands? Would it require a total overhaul? Do they just think that people will forget and they'll slowly but surely move more toward sanity? What do you think happens? Like, how can you advise a place, as somebody who follows the media closely, how do you advise a place like CNN, if you were asked, to win back? I'm not saying to get the conservative audience. I'm just saying to be able to look people in the eye and say, we're actually a news network again.
Well, sure, you can rebuild by going out and aggressively hiring people and turning them loose. Same thing at the Washington Post. But you got to be willing to spend the money. Jeff Bezos, by my calculation, has a lot of money. So
that's true.
Go out
yeah, we Clay and I checked on that. Jeff Bezos has got a pretty
that is a fact check is accurate. Yes, yes.
But you got to be willing to spend it, and a lot of places are just worried about their profit margins these days. The business model has kind of collapsed, especially for a place like CNN. Yeah, it's like 50 liberals and Scott Jennings. At least they have Scott Jennings. But I think that a lot of these places just don't get it. Like, they bring in these new CEOs and they just want to fatten the profit margins. Well, you got to invest money in journalism in order to have an audience. And if you don't do that, then you're just kind of skating along. And it just seems to me that the world has changed. Digital media has changed. Everybody's got all this stuff on their phones. And you got to really rethink what you're doing, because these places, CNN, MSNBC as an example, when Trump announced the crackdown on crime here in Washington, just completely went into opposition mode. No, he's not telling the truth. The numbers are wrong. Well, it doesn't really matter if you're being hijacked. I know people this has happened to. If people are afraid to walk the streets, and then you start arguing about numbers, it's just, it's like going into opposition mode. It's back into the resistance. And I think that's what's happening with a number of these media outlets.
We're talking to Howard Kurtz, MediaBuzz on Fox News every Sunday. Both Buck and I have been guests. Really enjoy that you have the space to actually make arguments on the show, to have real discussion.
Thanks.
And I would suggest, Howie, that the discussion surrounding Trump and Putin meeting tomorrow will likely be just an absolute mess because of the past Russia collusion the stories and, frankly, much of the hoax surrounding it. How can the media, if people want to be informed, accurately cover anything happening with Putin and Trump, given all the mess of past Putin-Trump coverage? Is there a way to actually do it in a trustworthy manner at all?
Well, you guys should go do the show from Alaska. That's number one. Secondly,
I would love to go
because Clay actually is desperate. I'm being serious. He's desperate to go to Alaska because I told him it's if you like the outdoors and natural beauty, it's incredible.
I want to go.
Also once you see a grizzly bear in real life, you're like, oh, that's very interesting.
We've got the governor, by the way, a little bit of a tease here, next hour of Alaska, who will be with us talking about the situation. But how do you cover it based on the failures of the media in the past?
I think it has less to do with the media's insane over coverage of Russia than it does with what appears to be happening. I mean, a week ago, Trump was gung-ho about this, and there has been a dramatic lowering of expectations where he says, well, we'll have the first meeting, but it's just a listening exercise, and if the first meeting goes well, we'll get to the second meeting. He's also got Zelensky not going along. So I think Trump loves this sort of face-to-face negotiation, big TV spectacle with world leaders. I did it with Kim Jong-un, for example. But he's got to have something to show for it. And I think, he'll come out and do the big joint press conference. And if it looks like he's at least started a process where there could be a ceasefire in this brutal and bloody war, started by war criminal Vladimir Putin, then I think he'll get good coverage. And if it looks like it's just a small step and they haven't really done much, then people in the press will question whether it was worth inviting this dictator onto U.S. soil.
No doubt.
Appreciate you being with us, Howie. Thanks for making the time, and we'll see you soon on Media Buzz on Fox News.
Great to be here. Thanks, guys.